I can even take off my hat.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Adam Bittner, digital sports producer for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, joined today for our weekly Paul Zeise, Zeise's Right video by Post-Gazette columnist Paul Zeise. Paul, how are you?
I'm doing good, Adam. I'm doing good. It's a beautiful day out here, so I decided to come outside.
Yeah, you're down in Atlanta seeing your family, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. And this is this I can get used to this weather every day. We don't obviously have this kind of weather every day, but right now we have some of it going on up there, so it's not too bad.
Yeah, not bad at all. In case you're just joining us for the first time, this is our weekly video with Paul, and we talk all things sports. We'll get things started today with some Steelers talk. Paul, the Steelers traded for Allen Robinson from the LA Rams this week, and it completed what was really another busy, off-season free agency period for, signing and bringing in NFL veterans. What do you think of this kind of move from? I remember the off seasons when the Steelers would pick up like maybe one or two guys in free agency, and that was a big deal. Now, they're bringing in 5, 6, 7, 8 guys. This is a real shift in the way this team is doing business, isn't it?
Well, it is a little different. I think they're clearly trying to backfill the roster, trying to just get as many guys in to fill as many spots as they can, because I think with the draft coming up, that you have two choices. You basically are bound to draft, based on your needs, or you can do what the Steelers have done, and now they've given themselves some flexibility. I mean, I don't think that signing Allen Robinson means they won't take a receiver or shouldn't take a receiver. But if the receiver isn't there that they don't, if the receiver that they want isn't there when they draft, now they don't have to take them. They don't have to feel pressure. Well, we got to get a receiver. We got to fill that spot. We got to, now all of a sudden they don't have to do that. Now they can basically worry about trying to get the best players they can possibly get. They got a corner. They got a receiver. They got 2 offensive linemen. They got a defensive lineman. They re-signed one of their own defensive linemen. They got 2 middle linebackers. I mean, they pretty much did what they had to do, right? And they re-signed one of their safeties. They pretty much did what they had to do to make sure that when the draft comes up and those 3 early picks they have, what are they, 17, 30, and whatever it is, 49 or whatever it is, 17, 32, and 49, I think it is, right? Something like that. Yeah. When they get those 3 picks, Adam, they can get guys who are going to be, difference makers. Guys that are going to, maybe have to play this year or be able to play this year, and they can get them at even a couple of these positions they sign guys at, but they don't have to feel the pressure of it, And so to me, I mean, the Allen Robinson signing, it's the ultimate example of a, I would call it very, very low risk with some upside. I don't know if I'll go as far as high reward, but I think that Allen Robinson at his stage in his career after his injuries and all that other stuff, you know what? He could become a viable third receiver for them and be a really good option as a veteran and, catch, I don't know, 40, 45, 50 passes, maybe something like that. Who knows? You know what I mean? And have, I don't know, 5 touchdowns. Okay. You basically have given up nothing for him. You're paying him $5 million a year, and you gave up, 17 spots in the 7th round is basically what you gave up to get him. So it's the kind of move I think that sort of does show and speak to what you're saying, Adam, about maybe they're going to start doing things a little differently every single year where they're a little bit more active in free agent. Of course, we didn't see them go and do the big free agent splash that everyone wants them to do every so often, but they went out and got a lot of players that were on the market that fit needs and fill needs. And I think if you fill needs in free agency, it allows you to be better, I think, in the draft because you can pick the best guys out there, the best guys on your board whenever it's your turn to pick.
Yeah, I think that sets me up well for this question, Paul, which is that it is a long-term trend. If they're going to be doing this more, do you think that's a net positive or a net negative that they have fewer of their own guys kind of filling those needs and maybe there's less development than we've seen in this organization in the past? but you're remaining, I think, a little more nimble. Or like you said, you go get these veterans, and then if they work out, great. If not, maybe you have some guys that can then step up because you picked better players in the draft rather than just drafting for need. Do you think that this kind of change in philosophy is a net positive or a net negative for the franchise?
Well, I mean, I don't know that they'll have to do this every year, Adam. I mean, there's some guys that probably, every year because of free agency that you cut guys or you release guys or you move on from guys. And so, I don't know that they're going to have to go out and get eight to 10 guys or whatever it's been every single off season. But I do think it'll be a part of what they do. And I think it's a positive because to me, I keep going back to this. It gives them flexibility and freedom in the draft. And so, say they go out and they draft it, in the first round, listen, they could even draft a corner. I know some people still think, well, now they got Patrick Peterson. No, they need a corner. So say they go and, everybody, obviously, obviously everybody talks about Joey Porter's kid, right? But say they draft a corner at 17. What they've done in this offseason by getting Patrick Peterson is that it allows them maybe to have this corner that you draft be, sort of your second guy for a year, get his feet wet, or even a slot guy for a year to get his feet wet and learn because you've got Patrick Peterson. So then all of a sudden, now this guy develops. You can get rid of Patrick Peterson or you can move on from him. And this guy now becomes your corner for the next 7, 8, 9, 10 years or whatever. So I think it's going to be a philosophy of filling roster spots. I think this is the way they're going to do it. But I don't know that it's necessarily going to be this much of a turnover every year. I just happen to think that this team right now is in a period of transition, where a couple of the guys they drafted, like Devin Bush, just didn't work out. And a couple of other guys got old. And so it seems like this year and maybe even next year, if you look at the contracts coming up and the people that are going to have to move on from, there could be a situation where, they have another offseason next year where they bring in 6, 8, 10 guys. But I don't think it's going to be every single year because if it is, put it this way, Adam, to answer your question, it's a net positive right now. But if 3 years from now they still have to bring in 8 or 10 guys every offseason, that probably speaks to the fact that they're not drafting well. And so it's a net positive now. Probably 3, 4 years from now, if they're still doing it, it's a net negative.
Paul, I think you've alluded to this a little bit, but what do you think about this group as a whole? What kind of grade would you give it? Is it more of a workman-like, group that kind of, like you said, fills needs? Do you think it has upside? What grade do you give this in terms of what they can do to make this team better in 2023?
This free agent class?
Yeah, we'll throw Allen Robinson in there too as a trade acquisition.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. All the new guys they brought in. I mean, I give them a solid B. I don't think there's any superstars in this group. I actually think there's a chance that maybe one of the linemen gets cut. Actually, doesn't even make the team. But at the end of the day, I think because they've got solid football players, guys who can come in and give them depth, or in the case of Peterson and probably Robinson, starters, right? So it's a good mixture of players that I think are good, solid, like you said, workman-like players. So I give them a B, maybe, a B minus, maybe B. We have to see how good Robinson is. I mean, obviously, if Robinson and Peterson play really well this year, then probably that moves to like an A. But there's nothing about this group that gets me excited. But by the same token, there's nothing about this group that I didn't like. So, I mean, and that's all you can ask for is somebody who observes football. Does the plan that we are watching make sense? And the plan so far makes sense. Now, if they use their first round pick on a quarterback, then all of a sudden we can say, well, this probably doesn't make sense. But, I mean, so far, everything I've seen from Omar Khan and Andy Weidel, everything I've seen has made sense. It lines up the way you want it to line up. It speaks to a front office that seems to have a plan.
Paul, this is probably the last time we're going to talk to you during the NFL draft, but this is probably the last time we're going to talk to you before the NFL draft next week. Who are some names that you really want to see the Steelers get? Maybe 2 or 3 guys that if they get that guy in the first round, you're saying that's a successful draft. Are there 2 to 3 guys, or is this a matter of, hey, maybe it's just Joey Porter Jr. or maybe Ferris Johnson Jr. A couple of guys? How are you looking at this first round?
Well, I mean, if they can get Jalen Carter, obviously that would be, that's the newest pipe dream, is that they're going to trade up and get him, or whatever. I'll say this. I would like to see them get a really big, fast defensive lineman, whoever's available left at 17, or a really big, strong, physical left tackle. That's to me, I think, what they need to do. At 30, 31, if he's still on the board, somebody like Jordan Addison, I think would be a really good pick for them, right? Or that corner we talked about, one of whoever would be like about the 6th or 7th, probably corner on the board. If it's still somebody that's rated really like a first-round grade type guy, take him. And then at 49, I would like to see them do the opposite. Either if they take a corner at 31, take a receiver at 49. So if you're asking me, I think in that 17 is early enough, I think, to get a dominant or a, potentially dominant tackle or defensive lineman. And I think that changes their team. One of those 2 positions really changes their team. I mean, if they're able to get like a guy, like a Jalen Carter or somebody like that, and they're able to plug that guy in with their defense right now with Watt behind them and Hayward to his side and Minka Fitzpatrick and Highsmith behind them, I think all of a sudden now that the Steelers defense becomes downright scary. Conversely, I think if they get a big left tackle and they're able to move Dan Moore, have him compete for the guard spots, competition is always good. You might end up with the new big left tackle being the new tackle, Dan Moore as the left guard or something, right? And you go from there. So to me, one of those 2 positions, I would be ecstatic if they drafted one of those 2 guys. And like I said, with the 2nd and 3rd pick, I'd like to see them go corner receiver or receiver corner, because I think that getting impact players at those 2 positions now all of a sudden really changes the projection of these teams. So of the Steelers, because I think they still need one receiver. I know they got Allen Robinson. I feel like they still need one receiver. If they can get one really high, now all of a sudden, I mean, look, your entire team should be, or philosophy for the next 3 or 4 years should be, to build around that young quarterback that you just drafted. So, if you give him another, he has a good tight end. He's got a couple of good running backs behind him. He's got a good tight end to throw it to. Give him another weapon to throw the ball to, and continue to build that offense that way. I think that, and quite frankly, it wouldn't hurt if it's somebody that runs like a 4.3 40, right? A burner guy that really, really stretches defenses and allows. I mean, can you imagine if you had to, keep the top on a guy on the left, and then in the slot somewhere you have Pickens or Deontay Johnson, actually, and you have Pickens on the other side going to, with being able to stretch, do what he does. I mean, I don't know how you defend that, especially when they've built their offensive line and their philosophy to the point where if you sell out to stop the pass, they'll just hammer you with the run. So to me, I think if they can get a burner of a receiver, right, or a corner that can, really lock down, a guy who covers, great coverage. Now I think that really puts them probably one step ahead of where, I kind of have them right now.
Paul, going to switch topics to baseball. The big news landing early Thursday was that the Oakland Athletics are moving to Las Vegas, or at least they seem like they intend to. Paul, it's been a long saga out there with the Oakland Coliseum, whatever you want to call it. It's changed names like 30 times in my life. I don't know what they're calling it these days, but what's your reaction to them finally moving on from Oakland, and now Oakland will go from having 3 pro franchises to 0 in a span of about a decade, a little bit less than that.
Well, let me see. So it would have been about 1993. I actually went to an Oakland A's game, 92, maybe 92, early 90s. And I thought the stadium was a dump back then. So this is now, what, 30 years later? I can't imagine what a dump it is. In fact, isn't that the stadium where Ben Roethlisberger, the X-ray machine, isn't that the saga of the X-ray machine where Ben Roethlisberger was basically took, 15, 20, 25 minutes to get him back to some old X-ray machine. And so there's that. I think the other thing is Oakland, it's pretty clear Oakland is, they're not going to support their team. I mean, it's just it's a different market, They're not. If you move them to Vegas, I bet you they'll have a lot of support because the people in Vegas, for two reasons. One, people in Vegas like events, and they're willing. You see what happened with the hockey team; they'd love to have a pro team. But two, I think that a lot of people that are, Vegas is one of those places a lot of people are moving to, and so you have a lot of potential for fan growth there as well. But I don't blame them. I'd get out of Oakland too. First of all, Oakland's a hellhole. Second of all, I think that the fan base there doesn't care about them. That's probably the biggest thing. And if you don't have fans there that care, and you don't have a city that values you, why stay, right? I mean, the Raiders got the hell out of there. They're getting they're getting out of there. So to me, it's all about the fan base, and there just isn't one. There's not enough people there that care. And I think the other part of it is, with San Francisco right across the bay there, and the 49ers being so good, right, and the Giants having so much success, I would be willing to bet many Oakland fans have converted to San Francisco fans. And so it's not like they won't have baseball in the Bay Area. They just won't have it in Oakland.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting sign of the times that, finally things are, finally we've talked about these moves in Oakland for years, and finally it seems like they've all happened. And I think it's just striking because you have what I think was a pretty proud sports city, Paul, go from 3-0 in a pretty short span of time. I don't think we've ever seen anything like this, have we?
No, I mean, I can't think of a city that really lost all their teams so quickly. We've had a team lose one team here or one team there, but I don't know that we've had a city lose all of them like this. But it speaks volumes about the fact that people in Oakland don't value, sports. They don't value professional sports. They don't value going to games. And you know what? If you don't value, then you don't have a team. And I think, it'll be interesting to see if they move out, if 10 years down the road when baseball looks to expand, if they say, oh, let's put a team in Oakland, right? Because that's what happens at times as well. And Houston is a great example with the Texans. The Browns, actually, the new Browns are a good example. If they had just built our Modella Stadium, they wouldn't have had to go through the Ravens, new Browns saga. But to answer your question, no, I can't think of a time when a team lost all of its team, when a city lost all of its teams this quickly and this close to each other.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, and I think to your point, it's also a values thing because what are we seeing in even college football right now, Paul? It's possible Cal, Stanford, those two schools are going to end up without possibly being in a major conference, or if they are in a quote unquote major conference, it's not going to be quite as posh as where it was when they were with USC and UCLA and in the Pac-12. So there's a reason in the college ranks you're not seeing those teams be valued the same way the teams in LA are. Those are all interesting developments. But Paul, let's get to the main event of the baseball talk, which is your red hot Pittsburgh Pirates. We are recording on Thursday afternoon, so they won all 3 games in Colorado. They swept them. They're hot hitting they're as hot as I've seen them in many years, Paul, in terms of what they're doing at the plate. It's led by a lot of veterans, but there's also guys like Rodolfo Castro that are contributing. How sustainable is this offensive output?
I mean, I can't imagine they're going to do. What did they average in Colorado? 10 runs a game or something like that? Was it 5? So it was 14, 5, and 14, right? Wasn't that what they scored?
Something like that, yeah.
They're 33. I can't imagine they're going to average 11 runs a game for the rest of the season. But I do think that, I like what I've seen. Now, obviously, There's always questions: can Andrew McCutchen sustain it? You know, at his age, continue to play and stay healthy and all that other stuff. But you know what? He's a good hitter. He still has his hands, and he still has his ability to turn on a fastball. And I think the big thing with him is now with the DH, you know, you have the chance to preserve his legs and preserve his back and all the other stuff that you do with older guys because he doesn't have to go out and play a lot. He can hit. So, you know, I think that I don't know that I'm going to predict that he's going to, you know, have a banner year, but I do think he's going to be. I think what he's doing is going to be sustainable from the standpoint of I don't necessarily think he's going to get hurt, you know, and miss a bunch of games or, you know, his body's going to break down because I think they're going to be smart with him. So he could. I think that's sustainable. You know, Reynolds obviously was way hot, and then it cooled down a little bit. But I mean, I think Reynolds is a good hitter, and he's going to be a good hitter. You know. We've got to see some of these other guys who seem to be hitting above their head, right? But I think this offense is going to be better than it was last year for the long haul. And I mean, I don't know what better means, but I think that this is not going to be a team that's going to go through those lulls where they have 5, 6, 7 runs and it's just painful to watch them try to hit the ball. Right? Or 5, 6, 7 games where it's just painful to watch them hit the ball. I think they've got enough good hitters. I mean, Carlos Santana is a really professional hitter, right? He's not going to bat 300 for you or whatever, but he's a guy that's going to have good at bats pretty much every time he gets up. If you have enough guys in your lineup that have good at bats, right? You know, Castro, we have to see. You know, obviously when O'Neal Cruz gets back, I guess not until August, but when he gets back, we have to see. But when you've got these older veteran guys that are getting good at bats, I think legitimately you have a chance that it can be sustainable.
Yeah. I think there's two sides of that though, Paul, right? Which is that I think as a Pirates fan, you want to see these young guys taking up more of the mantle. And so far, you know, you really haven't. And part of that's because O'Neal Cruz got hurt. He was supposed to be a big part of this team. He's not. But does it concern you at all that maybe in the big picture, because I don't think a lot of us expect the Pirates to win a lot this year. You know what? Maybe they'll surprise us. Maybe they'll contend for a wild card. And maybe that'll be worth it. But in the big picture, does it concern you at all that so much of the production is coming from these older guys that probably don't figure to be big parts of the future? As compared to some of these guys in these younger players who are supposed to be what this is built around?
It doesn't, and I'll tell you why. Because I think that I think that this had to be a year where there was results on the field. This, you know, you couldn't sell me or anyone else on the idea that, hey, we're going to throw this year away again and have a bunch of young guys play all the, you know, innings and everything. They had to win some this year. And I think that's why they brought in some of these veteran guys. And that's why they, you know, brought in guys like Kutch, because they knew that they had to win some games. So to me, you know, Adam, a perfect scenario is that they continue to play well, right? And then by June, mid-June, whatever, you know, the service time, all that crap, right? Whatever those dates pass, which I don't understand what exactly the dates are, but you know what I'm talking about. So now all of a sudden they can start thinking about bringing up some of these young guys, right? Then you trade Carlos Santana. You know, you're not going to get a haul for him, but someone, you know, if he's a veteran, legitimate bat, and somebody needs a bat off the bench, okay. Then you can trade, you know, who's the guy that's going crazy right now?
Connor Joe.
Connor Joe. Why not? Right? You could trade him too. You could even, you know, you're not going to trade McCutchen under any circumstance. My point is, then, you know, you could even trade Rich Hill. I mean, he's given you a couple of legitimate outings. And give him, you know, you start moving some of those guys and then backfilling them with some of the young guys who are, you know, now a half a season later, really ready to come into the major leagues. I mean, to me, that's probably the ideal scenario, because I think you can then make the case that, hey, our plan has worked.
Yeah, sometimes it's like, it's a little wild to know we're 3 years into this, Paul, going on 4, and sometimes I think in some ways this team is older than the team that they tore down in 2019. And so we gotta get younger, and now they're not younger as presently constituted. But I agree. I think it is a process, and it's where do you get by the end of the year?
Right. I'll say this, Adam. What does it look like at the end of the year? Which is kind of what I was getting at. Right. You have these older guys now that are helping you win games. You hope that then you start bringing up some of the younger guys that are then the service time and all that other stuff. But you hope that you're bringing some of those guys up. They're filling it out in the roster, right? And they finish the year, and you look at the team at the end of the year, and you say, well, you know what? It's McCutcheon and Reynolds and a lot of young guys, right? So to me, allergies are getting to me here. Don't worry about it, though. To me, that's the ideal scenario. The one guy, like I said, I couldn't think of his name. I was glad Connor Joe is the one guy who let's cool the jets on putting this guy in the Hall of Fame. Okay, I think that if he's still doing this in mid-May, end of May, okay, then I'll start to become a believer. If he's still doing this in mid-June, they better get on the phone and try and call every single general manager they know and get him traded, because I think he's playing way above his head.
Yeah, he's been something. It's pretty funny because he's kind of a boomerang guy who was drafted by the Pirates pretty high and then kind of became a huge bust for them, and they moved on from him, and now they're bringing him back, and he's finally doing stuff for them. You don't see careers like that very often, so I think that's
this is like his fourth team, isn't it?
Something like that. Yeah, I think he was with definitely with the Rockies. I think I can't remember his other teams, but very interesting career from that guy so far, and now he's finally producing for the team that drafted him just after a long journey. So pretty interesting. Paul, one of the young guys I do want to talk about is Rodolfo Castro. He's pretty much taken over for O'Neal Cruz. We've seen him be hot in the past. We've seen him go through 6 weeks hot streaks, and then we've seen him do nothing for 6 weeks. And for that reason, I think a lot of the projection models that you looked at were pretty catastrophic for him going into this season. They looked like pretty much saying this guy, of all the middle infielders the Pirates have, this guy is one of the least likely to latch on compared to O'Neal Cruz, Ji-hwan Bae, maybe Nick Gonzalez when he's ready. But he's playing well, and I think he has power that plays. Paul, do you see Rodolfo Castro as asserting himself as a long-term piece, or how long do you want to see him produce to really believe in him as a long-term piece of this franchise?
I mean, I think you give him this season. You have to give him this season, a full season, 162 games, because as you just pointed out, I mean, there have been times when I've watched Rodolfo Cruz say, boy, this guy has a chance to be a real superstar. And there's other times when I've watched the guy and said, I can't believe they can't find someone better than this guy. He's got to show that he can be consistent. He doesn't have to produce, at a superstar level an entire season. But he can't have those dips where, he just looked completely lost for so long that people start to wonder, okay, what is it that anybody sees in this guy? So he, to me, solves some problems or solves some issues, really, if he's able to be that guy, right? And I think if he's able to be that guy, and you have him and Cruz at second and short for a long, long time, now all of a sudden you add Hayes at third, you're starting to put together a team, right, where, wow, this group can really grow together. So he's a wild card for this team, if you ask me. And I think that's the most important thing with him is he's got to show he can do it consistently, week after week after week after week. And those bad weeks can't be those weeks where he looks completely lost at the plate, right? And then he's the kind of guy, when he's not doing well at the plate, it affects him in the field. It's very clear when you watch him. He's one of those mental guys like that, where if he's not doing well at the plate, the rest of his game goes to hell. So he's a guy that can be that guy, Adam. But I want to see a 162 game sample of what it looks like at the end. And if it's a season where he's had very few dips, like, and I'm not talking about just where he's not red hot. I'm talking about where he's terrible and it lasts for 3 weeks. If he doesn't have those dips, I agree with you. I think he's got some really good tools, and he could become a really good part of what they're going to do for the future.
Paul, I want to get into the Penguins GM search a little bit. Some names have been thrown out there. Jason Botterill, who was the assistant GM here for a long time, helped win Stanley Cups. They're talking a lot about that guy from Toronto. I think his name is Dudas. He's kind of been sidelined up there, but he's known as kind of an analytics whiz. Are the Penguins kind of at this point an example of what happens when you ignore analytics? I know all the time we talk about there's too much analytics in sports. There's too much numbers stuff. But I think with the Penguins, there was a lot of kind of patronage stuff going on in the front office, on the ice. Guys like Jeff Carter, who had a relationship with Ron Hextall in the past. Kasperi Kapanen through his dad, Sammy Kapanen. And I would hear them talk all the time, Paul, about, well, we went out and got this guy because he can do this and he can do this. But they would never talk about them doing it well. It was just that they were able to go do that job on the ice, but sometimes the analytics weren't there, and then you saw on the ice that they were bad. Do the Penguins need to get a little more analytically savvy? And I'm not saying overdo it. I'm not saying make every decision based on analytics. But are we kind of seeing with them what happens when you ignore analytics and what the numbers are saying at the expense, of the guys on the ice?
I guarantee you, if you asked, I don't even, who is actually now the owner of this team? I mean, who is the one guy that would answer questions? I guess, now that Burkle and Mario are like, who is the guy from the Fenway Sports Group that we would ask questions to? I don't even know who that is.
He spoke when they fired Ron Hextall, but I've already forgotten his name.
I bet you if you asked him, he would say, "Oh, we have an analytics department." Blah, 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 blah. But you know what, Adam? I can't believe I'm going to say this. As you know, I can't believe I'm going to agree with you on this. I think part of the biggest problem over the last 2 years, at least, or 3 years, is that they've made almost, and I don't want to use the word emotional, but they've kind of made emotional decisions and not numerically sound, not analytically sound, right? Not based on what the numbers and everything else are actually telling you about a player, right? They've made a lot of decisions based on, well, this guy I went to war with, before, and he never let me down. Well, that might have been 10 years ago or 5 years ago, right? I would even go so far as to say a guy like Dumoulin, who they kept trying to convince us was one of their best defensemen. And clearly, I guarantee you, any way you do it, I'm sure the numbers told you, as well as your eyes told you, that wasn't the case. I honestly think this. They need to hire a younger, like you said, more savvy guy that really understands analytics, general manager. It wouldn't hurt them to hire an assistant general manager that has a background in scouting or whatever. And it wouldn't hurt them if those two guys, and I know this is going to be, fired Mike Sullivan. Because I think Mike Sullivan is a big part of the problem as to why this roster can't get redone the right way. Because I think he's another guy that falls in love with players, can't really, overlook things, and he's got it, the guys that are his favorites. I think that they're not going to make progress unless they move on from him. You've cleaned house already, really clean house. Develop a new philosophy to remake this roster, because that's what really needs to happen. You can't have, and honestly, like if Mike Sullivan had his way, I bet you Brian Dumoulin would be back. I bet you Tristan Jarry would be back, right? I bet you, some of these guys that the Penguins probably should look to buy out or move on from, they would be back. And clearly now, what is it, 5 years since they won their last playoff series? I mean, they lost 5 playoff series in a row, and then this year they didn't make the playoffs. So, the last time they won a playoff series was whoever they beat before they lost to the Capitals, that, in what was it, 18 or whatever it was. They lost to the Capitals in the second round. Whoever they beat in the first round, I forget who it was, the Rangers, the Islanders, whoever the hell it was. They beat that team. That's the last time they had playoff success. So to me, you know, when you tell me you've got 2 Stanley Cups, so it's working. Well, now I think there's plenty of evidence that it's no longer working. So I can't believe it, because you and I spar quite often on social media when it comes to analytics stuff. But I can't believe that I'm actually agreeing with you on this one. And I think that, you know, they need it wouldn't hurt them if they brought in a younger, more forward-thinking general manager that really understands the numbers. An assistant general manager that probably is a little more of a grizzled vet that is good at the whole scouting part of it, or understands the scouting part of it, because I think those two would work together, and be able to really identify, A, who they need to move on from on this team, and B, who they need to bring in, or what they need to bring in order to try and salvage. See, what they did with Ron Hextall was basically waste 2.5, probably if you count next year, probably 3 seasons at the end of your star trio's career. They've wasted it with Ron Hextall because he was the worst choice for general manager. And I wrote about it last week. It's not like I'm, you know, saying anything like I'm reinventing the wheel here, but they need a guy who comes in who's not emotionally attached to a bunch of players, who will look at the numbers, the analytics, the statistics, you know what I mean? And really kind of go out and develop, okay, a self-scout that is objective. And then move on from there. Because I really believe if you keep Mike Sullivan in the equation, we're going to see a whole lot of the band getting back together next year. Well, you know, Jari missed some time, and he was never healthy. And, you know, Chris Letang missed 18 games. And, you know, it's that. We were only 1 game out of it, blah, blah, blah. And down the stretch, we had some really good games against some of the best teams. We showed we can still do it, blah, blah, blah. It has to be he's removed completely from the roster compilation. And if he's removed completely from the roster compilation, he's obviously a really good coach. But the other issue is, Adam, and I don't mean to, filibuster here, but the other issue is he the right coach for this group of players? Given the way he wants to play, given the way he thinks teams are supposed to play, is he the right coach? I have a hard time watching a team that had 10 or 11 blown third period leads because they can't adjust the way they play once they get a lead, because we've got to continue to attack, and then all of a sudden you're giving up odd man break after odd man break, and then people want to say, well, the goalie's bad. Well, the goalie, you know what? Yeah, the goalie should make stops here and there, but when he's completely under duress in a third period that you're winning, that's a system problem. That's not a goalie problem. That's a system problem. So I love Mike Sullivan. I think he's a really good coach, Adam. I think that the Penguins are probably not doing themselves a service if they don't move on from him.
Yeah, I can see that argument, Paul. And here's the thing I'd say about the analytics stuff is that, I don't think you need someone to come in here and only consider that. It's like you said, you need to have both. I think that the analytics are important in the very traditional sense of if you're the Penguins and you're going to succeed in these next couple of years with Crosby, Malkin, Letang, and you're not going to rebuild and you're not going to kind of go into the Pirates mode of tearing things down, you're going to have to find players that other teams don't want, and you're going to have success with them, right? I mean, that's the only way that this is going to work, because if you pay market rate for some of these guys in free agency, you're going to end up in salary cap hell. I think you've got to kind of be that team that takes advantage of what the Penguins were under Ron Hextall, where they would make big analytics catastrophes and get guys that were in decline and not set up to succeed. You want to kind of get on the other side of that and take players that teams, you want to be like Seattle taking Jared McCann from the Penguins, right? I mean, that's kind of how I look at it. That's what the analytics to me is about, is you got to find undervalued assets that have a chance to come here and overperform expectations. Right.
And I think that, the one thing I keep hearing is that the Fenway Sports Group is going to consider a female general manager, which, I'm not opposed to that for a lot of teams, but they better have, when I say young, I mean a guy that's got a lot of experience, but is still younger and has, a grip of the analytics. What they don't need to do is hire somebody that's a first-time general manager, because this is a hard job right now. 2 years from now, I think it's a much easier job than it is right now. 2 years from now, you're probably moving on from Malkin, and you're probably moving on from Letang. Crosby may or may not stay around, but at the end of the day, 2 years from now, you're actually just basically going to be rebuilding. Now you're being asked to rebuild on the fly and figure out how to get a team with 30 something now. I think they're all over 35 now, aren't they? I mean, I think they've crossed that threshold, haven't they? They're very close to it now. 35 plus types that are in win now mode. You've got to be able to somehow go out and again, priority number one has to be goalie. I don't care what anybody says. If they bring back Tristan Jarry, they're not serious about winning. And there's no disrespect to him. He's shown at times he can be a good goalie, but he's hurt all the time. And number one. Number two, he's too inconsistent. Number three, you rubbed me the wrong way with the whole thing about, I was never healthy this year. Okay, well, then why were you playing? Why were you playing if you were never healthy? Because you were hurting your team. Not to say that who would be the next guy. So it was DeSmith. Who was the guy that played about 10 games for them this year? I can't think. It wasn't Louis. It was the other guy. But anyway.
Tokarski.
What was that?
Justin Tokarski or something.
Tokarski, yeah, that's his name. So to me, I'm not saying Tokarski's better, but 100% Tokarski is probably better than 80% Jarry. Or 100% Casey DeSmith is much better than 80% Jarry. To me, that's the most important position on the ice. You cannot rely on a guy who's always hurt. You just can't.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that it'll be interesting to see how they handle that position, just because I'm not sure what's going to be out there for them otherwise. But
I'll say this: here's one other thing I'm going to say, Adam. Here's why this is a really, really hard job for the next general manager, which is why you need somebody that really knows what they're doing, right? What are the assets they have that they can trade and turn into something good?
Not a lot.
I mean, I guess you could trade Jake Gensel, right? But
without, I think the balance, Paul, is who can you trade for assets without basically tearing things down?
Right.
It's like, can you trade Jake Gensel and not be in a rebuild? I don't know.
No, I mean, he's one of your best players. Brian Rust, could you trade him? Probably not, because you're not going to get back what you know what I mean. You're basically at the very, very best in a trade like that. You're going to basically break even. I mean, Raquel, I guess. I mean, Zucker, I guess. But again, these are your best players, and so to me, there's one asset this team has. And I think, honestly, this year he probably has faded his own star a little bit, to the point where I don't know that they would get what they wanted to get out of him either. You could trade P.O. Joseph. He's still young. He's still considered a guy with potential, right?
Yeah, but what do you get for him?
What are you getting in return for him?
Yeah.
That's the problem. So my point is, it's not like, you can come in, different sport, but same idea. When Neil Huntington came in, right? Neil Huntington traded Jason Bay, was able to get some stuff for him.
Xavier Nady.
He was able to trade. Who was the pitcher that he traded? It got some good stuff for. There was 4 or 5 guys that he traded that helped lead to rebuilding. Well, the problem is, those guys on the Penguins are all guys that you're trying to win with.
The only thing this team has, Paul, is a good top 6. That's all you can really say on paper.
Exactly.
What good at, and that's all they have. So if you start tearing that up, what do you have left?
There's nobody else you can trade. So you have to do it through free agency, which you've got salary cap issues because of stupid contracts like Jeff Carter's, right? You've got a real big hole at goalie that you're going to have to fill. So to me, that's what makes this a really difficult job. It'd be an easy job. Listen, it would be an easy job if you told a general manager, listen, we don't care about trying to, win these next 2 years with Malkin and Crosby and Letang. Those 3 guys on the team, they'll sell tickets. Do whatever you got to do, just strip it down and rebuild it. Okay, well, that's easy. Because then all of a sudden you can talk about trading a guy like Jake Gensel and getting something really good in return in terms of like some prospects or drafts, picks or whatever, right? You can trade a guy like Rust. You could trade a guy like Zucker or Raquel. And here's the other thing. You could actually go and sit down to Malkin and Letang and say, listen, we're rebuilding. I know you have a no movement, no trade clause. Are there a couple of teams you'd be willing to waive that to? That maybe we could look into trading you so you can go play your last 2 years in a contender? I'm not saying they would do it, but at least it would give you the flexibility to say that. Hey, listen, we've made the decision. We're going to strip it down. So if you want to play with a bunch of kids, and lose 60 games next year, with those 3, you probably wouldn't lose 60, but still, you get my point. The whole point I'm trying to make is it makes it a really hard job when you don't have the flexibility to trade. And they don't have the flexibility to trade. I mean, they just don't. I keep hearing all these fans tell me that, they need to trade. They need to make some trades. Okay, let's look at the roster. Now, who are you trading that's not going to really hurt what you're trying to do, number one, and number two, that you are going to be able to replace? I mean, if you trade Jake Gensel, I guarantee you, you're losing that trade. Period.
Yeah. I think the only trade you can make, Paul, are for elsewhere. That this team doesn't want him because he didn't produce for whatever reason what they expected him to. But he has nice. I'm going to use Jared McCann as the example again. A guy who I think he was never more than a 15-goal scorer here, but he had very solid analytics. A lot of people were very upset when he left, and I don't think anyone expected him to become a 40-goal scorer for Seattle. But it was reasonable to think maybe he can score 30, maybe 35 in a good year. You know what I mean? Those are the guys that they're going to. I agree with you. If you're not going to rebuild, those are the kind of moves you're going to have to win. You're going to have to win them consistently, and that's hard to do in a league like the NHL.
It is. Like I said, you might be able to trade P.O. Joseph in a Jared McCann kind of deal, if that makes sense to you. Like you're talking about. Another team sort of giving up on a guy, right? Sort of, maybe down on him, doesn't really fit what they're looking for, has underperformed. But overall, if you look at his career, has pretty good analytical numbers, and, it's just in the midst of maybe it's a bad fit with the team, and they're just looking to maybe get a little younger. Maybe they'll take a shot at a P.O. Joseph in a low risk move like that ends up turning into a really good player. But I just don't see how there's that many moves like that to be made with this team. And that's why I keep going back to the fact that, this is a hard job right now. It's a much easier job if you're either a team that's really legitimately in win now mode or a team that's rebuilding. The Penguins are kind of in purgatory in that regard because they want to be in win now mode. I just don't know that they're good enough to be in win mode. I even think, I don't know that there's enough moves they can make. And here's the other thing that I think most people aren't really taking into consideration. What is the likelihood that Malkin and Crosby are going to play 82 games next year, and both of them play 82 games and both of them produce the way they produced this year?
Probably pretty low.
Right. So what does that tell you?
Yeah.
You have to, and Letang played 65 games, which was for him is a lot.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it. But to me, you had all 3 of them play at such a high level. And here's what nobody wants to talk about, Andrew. Nobody wants to talk about the fact that I'm sorry, Adam. Nobody wants to talk about the fact that those 3 had incredible seasons, and it wasn't enough to get this team to the playoffs.
Right. Well, I think there are a lot of people saying that, Paul, and that's what made Ron Hextall's. That's why he had to be fired, right? Is that
absolutely?
You get the season that if you gotten that season from them in 2012, 2010, 2011, those years where those guys got hurt, and they didn't get those full seasons, you would have killed for what the Penguins got out of those guys this year, even in their prime.
Right.
And you would have been a contender. And the fact that they're not really speaks to how flawed the roster Ron Hextall made was. So
this goes back to one last thing here. This goes back to what I said last year, though. Everybody that was all celebrating bringing back the band, and I said, all you're doing is delaying the inevitable. But I know why they did it. I get it. I understand it. But I said, all you're doing is delaying the inevitable. And I felt like I just think it's unrealistic to believe that this group is going to win one more Stanley Cup. So to me, now you're 1 year further behind in your rebuild efforts. And the thing about it is at the end of 2 years, it's going to be ugly because it's going to be a full rebuild. You're probably going to have to move on from, Gensel and Rust and some of these guys. And even though they're signed for a few more years, if Malkin and Letang are gone, now all of a sudden you're talking about, okay, this is a full-blown rebuild. And at that point, you're going to trade your best assets.
X Generation days, Paul, they're coming back. So, sooner or later, they're going to be here. It's going to be, Rico Fata, all those guys skating around the arena in front of 5,000 people.
Is there anybody that's more closely associated with those bad old days than Rico Fata? I mean, whenever people talk about those days, he's the name that always comes up.
Yeah, he was fast. He was like that kid in the Mighty Ducks movies who could skate fast and not do anything else. Couldn't stop.
Who would be the guy that you would associate with that Pirates stretch? What was the Japanese or Chinese second baseman that they brought in? Do you remember?
Aki Iwamura.
Aki Iwamura. There we go. He's the Rico Fata of the Penguins. Of the Pirates, I mean, Aki Iwamura is the Rico Fata of the Pirates. Awful stretch of years.
Yeah. They don't bring back good memories, Paul. But it'll be interesting to see where they go from here. Thanks for stopping by, Paul. Another long discussion. I think we got into a lot more hockey talk than we were expecting, but I don't necessarily have a problem with that. But 1 week to the draft, Paul. I'm looking forward to talking to you. I think you're going to be possibly in on Friday night. Talking picks with me.
Yep, absolutely. Sounds good. We will do it again, man.
Yeah, so please make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel so you get all of that content going into draft week. Otherwise, we will see you again soon.
All right, we'll see you.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you liked the video, please like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you enjoyed it on Apple Podcasts, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. For 6 months of digital access to post-gazette.com for just $6, click the link down in the description.